The Snow Queen. Once there was a wicked sprite. He made a mirror, a magical mirror, that made everything good and beautiful look horrible and mean. He flew around with it, this way and that, but in his excitement he dropped it. The mirror fell to the earth, where it was dashed into 100 million pieces, each hardly bigger than a grain of sand. When the pieces got into people's eyes, there they stayed, and then those people saw the world in a terrible, twisted way. Sometimes a piece would go into someone's heart, and the heart became a lump of ice. The sprite laughed to see what had happened, and still the splinters flew around in the air. And now you shall hear what happened next. In a crowded town of higgledy-piggledy houses lived two children, Kay and Gerda, who loved each other as if they were brother and sister. In the summer, they played together on the rooftops, or chatted across window boxes of roses. In winter, they huddled together in Gerda's house while her grandmother told them stories of the Snow Queen. She flies through the streets at night, said grandmother, and freezes all she looks at. Just let her come here, said Kay. I'd put her on the stove to melt. One evening, when Kay was at home, he looked out of his window and saw a flake of snow growing larger and larger and larger, until at last it became a woman. She was beautiful but stern, and seemed to be made of shimmering, sparkling ice. She beckoned to Kay, but he was frightened and turned away. At last, winter turned to spring, and then summer, and the roses bloomed. Kay and Gerda admired the roses, and it was then that Kay cried, "Oh, I feel such a sharp pain in my heart, and there's something in my eye." Splinters of the sprite's mirror had pierced his eye and lodged in his heart. "I think it's out now," said Kay. But it was not. "Look at that rose," he went on. "It's so ugly. You're ugly too, Gerda." Then he kicked the roses with his foot and ran away. All that summer he teased Gerda and mocked her. When winter came again, he didn't want to sit by the fireside listening to stories. Instead, he took his sled and ran into the town square. Spying a huge sleigh whizzing over the ice, Kay tied his little sled to it. Off they raced beyond the town into the swirling snow. When the sleigh stopped and the driver stepped out, Kay saw it was the Snow Queen herself. She was tall and slender, wore a cloak and hat of dazzling white snow. The Snow Queen drew Kay into her arms and kissed him. Her kiss was colder than ice. She kissed Kay once more, and he forgot all about Gerda, her grandmother, and his home. In the town, nobody knew where Kay had gone. Gerda missed him dreadfully, despite his teasing, and when winter was over, she put on her red shoes and went down to the river. "Have you seen Kay?" she asked the river. "If I give you my shoes, will you take me to him?" The river seemed to nod as it rippled, so she threw in her shoes, but they floated back to her. "Perhaps I didn't throw them far enough," thought Gerda, and climbed into a little boat by the bank. She didn't realize it wasn't fastened, and it floated away down the river. Gerda was afraid, but there was no turning back. As dusk fell, the river brought Gerda to a cottage with red and blue windows. An old woman was in the garden tending her roses. She reached out for Gerda's boat with a crooked stick. "Poor little child," she said, "come and tell me who you are and how you came here." Gerda told her everything. The old woman shook her head, saying she hadn't seen Kay, and offered Gerda ripe, juicy cherries. Then she took a golden comb and combed Gerda's hair, combing away her memories as well. She wasn't a wicked woman. She just longed for a little girl of her own. She made the rose bushes sink into the ground, in case they reminded Gerda of home. And so the summer days began to pass until, one day, Gerda saw a rose painted on the old woman's sun hat. In a rush, her memories came flooding back. "Oh, how long have I stayed?" cried Gerda, and she burst into tears, which fell to the ground, bringing the buried roses back to life. Gerda knelt down beside them. "Do you think Kay is dead?" she asked the roses. The roses shook their heads. "He is not dead. We have been in the earth where all the dead are." But Kay was not there. "Then I must keep looking," cried Gerda. She ran out of the garden, back into the wild world, now shedding into leaves with the end of summer. Gerda's feet were weary, and the search seemed so long and so hard that she curled up on the ground and began to cry. "Why are you so sad, little girl?" called the raven from its perch. Gerda told him her tale, and he nodded with excitement. "I think I've seen your Kay. I think he has forgotten you for a princess." "Oh, please, take me to him," begged Gerda. "Follow me," said the raven. The raven led Gerda to a palace. Her heart beat with anxiety and longing. They were crossing an echoing hall when Gerda stopped. "I think there is somebody just behind us," she said, and something rushed past like a shadow on the wall. "There are dreams," said the raven, "come to take royal thoughts for midnight rides." At last they reached the royal bedchamber. The ceiling was like a palm tree, with leaves of glass, and from it hung two beds that looked like flowers. In the last lay the princess, fast asleep, and in the second, "Oh, that's Kay," thought Gerda. She called his name, and he awoke, and turned his head. It was not Kay. Gerda sobbed, waking up the princess too. "What is the matter?" she asked. Gerda told her tale, and the prince offered her his bed for the night. The next morning she was given a carriage of pure gold to continue her journey. Near dusk, the carriage entered a dark forest, shining like a sunbeam. It caught the eyes of some robbers, who rushed at it crying, "Give me your gold." As they pulled Gerda out, a little robber girl called for them to stop. "I will ride with her," she said, taking the carriage to the robber's castle, high upon a craggy rock. That night Gerda could not sleep. Some wooden pigeons fluttered down, softly calling to her, "Coo, coo." "We have seen Kay. He is with the Snow Queen, carried away in her sleigh. She was headed for Lapland." "How do I get to Lapland?" she asked. "Ask Ba, the robber girl's reindeer," said the wooden pigeons. As morning broke, Gerda woke the robber girl and pleaded with her to let her go. The robber girl lifted her chin arrogantly. "I shall let you go," she said. "Ba will take you." Gerda climbed onto his back. "Farewell," she called, and the reindeer sped on, over bush and bramble, through great woods and over moor, as fast as he could go. On and on they flew, to the icy, frozen north. Ba set her down outside the queen's palace. "I can't take you any further," he said, "but you are good and sweet and innocent. You need no more help from me." Gerda ran on as fast as she could. Snowflakes whirled around her, enormous living snowflakes, for these were the Snow Queen's guards. They made terrifying shapes, hissing serpents, snarling bears, and spiky porcupines. Gerda cried out in fear, but she didn't run away. Her breath came out like mist from her mouth and formed angels that fought the guards. Hurrying on, Gerda came to the walls of the palace, which were made of driving snow, and battled her way through entrance gates of biting winds. Inside, she wandered through endless empty halls of snow, lit by the northern lights. And, in the very middle of the palace, on a frozen lake, Gerda at last found Kay, He sat still, so still he seemed to be frozen. Kay, she called, running up to him. She hugged him, her hot tears dripping onto Kay's chest. They reached right through to his heart, thawing the lump of ice. She talked to him of home, and her words and his melting heart brought tears to Kay's eyes too, washing away the splinters there. Gerda, he cried, is it really you? Gerda held him fast and wept for joy. It's so cold here, said Kay. It's so empty and cold. Gerda kissed his eyes, and they shone like her own. We must hurry, said Kay. We must leave before the Snow Queen returns. They took each other by the hand and tore out of the castle, laughing with relief. Ba was waiting to carry them home. At long last they arrived at Gerda's house, where her grandmother was overjoyed to see them. This is truly a fairy tale ending, cried the grandmother. And all the roses in the window box nodded their heads as if to agree. The